or Jesus Christ, let's put it that way, is represented by the sun. He's called the bridegroom, who comes out into the sky and does his circuit through the sky. And you and I live in the warmth of that sun. We live by the light of the sun so that we can see what we're doing, because Jesus Christ said, you work in the daytime because at the night time you can't see properly, therefore you have to cease your work. But the Bible's telling me here that these two lights are very important in our life, because even in the darkness we are still receiving the light of the sun, but it's a reflected light. When Israel, when they were out in the wilderness, they were led by a pillar of fire at night, and in the daytime a pillar of cloud to keep them from being fried in the desert and the wilderness. But there was a cloud there. There was a light that drove them, or rather that guided them at night. That light was the light of God, who was guiding Israel through their wilderness journey. And God has put a light for us. For Jesus Christ said, I am the light of the world. And He dwells in you to illuminate what you are in God. And when you see and look into your being, you begin to understand, as Isaiah did, that within this body, which is the temple of God, he said, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, with His train filling the temple. So you see, the light of God is necessary for us to see what God is doing. But here, in a nighttime experience, we're living by the light of the moon. The light of the moon is a reflected light. So you and I, if we're living in a night experience, we are not seeing the true light of God, but we're seeing a light which is being reflected to us. And that's why you have so many different doctrines and ideas, because so many people are still living in that nighttime experience when you haven't got the same light capacity as you have in the daytime. But Jesus Christ is the light of the world. So, for us today, I wonder what light you are living in. What is the light that has come into your life that's guiding you day by day? Is it the light of the sun, or is it the light of the moon? Because it will rather, depending on which light it is, that will determine your walk and your pathway and where you're going to go. Because in the nighttime, the moon will allow you to see enough so you're not going to trip over everything, and you're not going to fall into a hole unless you're not looking, of course. But in the nighttime, the moon is there, and on a full moon, you can almost read your paper out there in the nighttime experience. But God is showing us in this way that in this world in which we live, and in our experience, you will live in one of those two areas. You'll either live in a nighttime experience, or you live in a daytime experience. Because Jesus Christ is the light of the world. And when He comes to us, He begins to illuminate, first of all, ourselves, and then our pathway. In this little portion of Genesis here, in Genesis chapter 1, we are learning a lesson. Because the moon is all that many people in the world have to live by. Even many Christians today are still living by the moonlight. And therefore we're not aware of what God is really doing. And you and I need to know today what God is doing. In the moonlight, you can see enough to make your way around, but you cannot see the detail. So that while we're walking in the night experience, we are not really going to know God. In the nighttime experience, you and I only have a limited vision. But in the daytime, we can see clearly, because the light is sufficient for us. So, what happens in the daytime, or rather, what happens in the nighttime experience? Well, in the night, you can't see very much. You can only see a certain amount. And so we live in that time of restricted vision. Now let's go over into the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 5. And it says here, I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book, written within and on the back side, and it was sealed with 7 seals. This is your life. This is your life. For many people, your life is sealed, because the light of God has not yet penetrated sufficiently for you to see and understand exactly what's going on. It says, there was a strong angel that proclaimed with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof? And there was no man. There was no man that could open the book and loose the seals. This is the word of the Lord for us. This is the book that God has provided for us, a knowledge which is wrapped up in Jesus Christ. This is the knowledge of God that's been given to us so that we could see the road ahead, we could walk in the pathway of God, and we would know what God is doing. But many people today are walking in the moonlight and not in the light of the sun. And in the light of the moon, you can mistake the way very easily, because everything looks different by the moonlight. And so it is that it says here in verse 5, the elders said to me, don't weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open that book and to loose the 7 seals. To loose the 7 seals. There are 7 seals upon the book. Think about it. The book has been sealed. It's been sealed because we have not been walking in the light of God.
Amen.
We've been walking by the moonlight.
Yes.
And by the light of the moon, you're not going to see everything. You'll only just see enough, maybe to make your way wherever you want to go, but you will not see things clearly. It's the light of the moon. And for many people, that's all they've ever seen. So they've never truly seen God. They've never understood His will and His purpose, because they've not seen Him, but they've only seen the light of the moon. It's a reflected light. A reflected light. And so it says, I beheld, this is in verse 6, and lo, in the midst of the throne and the 4 beasts, in the midst of the elders, there stood a lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth.